Where birds should have been singing, there was only silence beneath the dark boughs of Mirkwood. Greetings, my friend. I am the Ranger, a wanderer of forgotten roads and keeper of old tales. On certain mornings, the stillness of the wild carries a warning more troubling than any cry in the night, and deep in the shadowed woods, something unseen had begun to stir. Draw closer to the fire, and walk with me now into a story hidden beneath roots, stone, and ancient fear. The shadow of Mirkwood lay long across the western lands, though summer had come. Beneath the great trees, the air remained cool and dim, touched by the scent of moss, damp bark, and hidden streams that wound through roots older than the kingdoms of men. In those days, Radagast the Brown dwelt at Roscobel, a humble house standing near the edge of the forest. The wise paid little heed to his affairs, for unlike Saruman, he sought neither counsels nor power, and unlike Gandalf, he seldom wandered among the cities of elves and men. Yet many living creatures knew him, and among birds and beasts his name was spoken with trust. It was often said by the woodman that if a wounded creature could crawl within sight of Radagast's door, it had already begun to heal. The morning began with mist drifting low over the grasslands east of the Anduin. Radagast stood outside his dwelling, scattering seeds among a gathering of thrushes and finches. His weather-stained brown robe brushed the dew-wet earth, and his tangled hair was alive with tiny movements as a pair of field mice climbed briefly across his shoulder. The old wizard smiled at their nervous haste and watched the birds descend in fluttering clouds. Yet even as he observed them, something troubled him. The songs were fewer than they should have been, and several familiar voices were missing from the chorus that greeted the dawn each day. A blackbird landed upon a fence post and tilted its head toward him. Radagast knew no speech of birds as men understood speech, yet he grasped their meaning as naturally as another might read a familiar book. He listened quietly, his expression darkening as the bird hopped closer. Others joined it, chirping and fluttering with unusual agitation. Several nests had been abandoned. Small creatures had vanished from the forest edge. Worse still, no scent or sign of ordinary hunters had been found. Foxes, wild cats, and hawks all took prey, but this was something different. Something was moving through the woods and leaving only silence behind. By midday, Radagast had set out beneath the trees. Sunlight filtered through tangled branches in pale shafts that barely reached the forest floor. Ferns brushed against his boots while squirrels darted among the trunks overhead. At first, the woodland seemed unchanged, yet the deeper he traveled, the more he noticed small disturbances. A burrow stood empty, though fresh food remained inside. A deer trail showed signs of panic, with hoof marks scattered wildly through the mud. Even the insects seemed strangely absent from places where they usually swarmed in countless numbers. The forest was holding its breath. Near a narrow stream, he knelt beside a patch of churned earth. A rabbit's fur clung to broken roots beside the water. The marks around it were difficult to read, and Radagast examined them carefully. Wolves still roamed far-off regions of Middle-earth, but these tracks seemed wrong. They were larger than any ordinary wolves, and the spacing suggested a creature of unusual weight. The wizard rested his hand upon the soil and closed his eyes. For several moments he remained motionless. Then he opened them sharply and drew a slow breath. A foul memory lingered there, faint but unmistakable, like smoke from a fire long extinguished. The day wore on, and clouds gathered overhead. Their shadows drifted across the forest while distant thunder murmured beyond the mountains. Radagast followed the trail northward until he reached a clearing where a fallen oak lay rotting upon the ground. There he found another sign. Deep grooves scarred the bark, as though enormous claws had raked through the wood. He placed his hand against one of the marks and felt a chill despite the warmth of the afternoon. Such wounds reminded him of stories far older than the kingdoms now standing in the world. Tales from darker ages, when servants of the enemy had prowled beneath black skies. A sudden cry shattered the silence. Radagast turned immediately and hurried through the undergrowth toward the sound. Branches snagged at his sleeves as he pushed between hazel bushes and thorny growth. Ahead, in a small hollow between mossy stones, a young roe deer lay trembling. Blood stained its flank. The wound was not mortal, but terror burned in the animal's wide eyes. Kneeling beside it, Radagast murmured gentle words and laid his hands upon the injury. Gradually the trembling eased. The deer struggled upright and pressed briefly against his shoulder before darting away into the trees. As the creature vanished, Radagast noticed something caught among nearby brambles. He stepped closer and drew out a strip of coarse gray cloth. It was torn and stained with dirt, clearly fashioned by men. The woodman often hunted these forests, yet something about the scrap unsettled him. The tear was fresh. Someone had passed through recently, and judging by the ragged edges, not willingly. He folded the cloth and tucked it into his belt. The mystery that had begun with missing animals now seemed larger than he had first believed. Rain began falling before sunset. Fine droplets whispered through the leaves and turned the forest paths slick beneath his feet. Radagast sought shelter beneath an overhanging ridge of stone, where roots hung like twisted ropes from the earth above. There he lit no fire. Instead he sat listening to the rain and the countless small sounds hidden within it. Owls called in the distance. Water dripped steadily from branch to branch. Then another sound reached him, so faint that many would have missed it entirely. It was a howl. The cry rose and fell across the forest, long and mournful. At first it seemed like the voice of a wolf, yet as it echoed among the trees, a deeper note emerged beneath it, something harsh and unnatural that made the skin tighten along the back of his neck. Radagast stared into the gathering darkness. He had heard wolves before, many times. This was not the voice of any wolf born beneath the sun. The sound carried an old malice, buried but not dead. Memories stirred within him of ancient tales told among the wise, of dreadful creatures bred in forgotten strongholds of evil. The howl came again, closer now. Somewhere far beyond the curtain of rain, birds exploded upward from the canopy in a flurry of frightened wings. Radagast rose slowly to his feet. His staff rested lightly in his hand, though he did not yet raise it. A cautious wizard survived longer than a bold one. The darkness between the trees seemed thicker than before, and for an instant he thought he glimpsed a shape moving among the shadows. It was gone at once. Only the rain remained. Night settled over Mirkwood. Clouds smothered the stars, and the forest became a maze of black trunks and whispering leaves. Radagast knew he should return to Roscobel before the trail grew cold, yet something urged him onward. The missing animals, the torn cloth, the monstrous tracks, and now that dreadful cry all pointed toward a danger hidden beneath the forest's familiar face. He felt the weight of it growing. Whatever hunted in these woods had not come by chance. Somewhere ahead lay the answer. Long after darkness had claimed the land, a raven descended silently onto a branch above him. Water glistened upon its feathers as it leaned forward and fixed him with one bright eye. The bird uttered a low croak, unlike any ordinary call. Radagast looked up at it and frowned. The raven was afraid. More than afraid. It had seen something. Without another sound, it spread its wings and flew north into the storm. The wizard watched until it vanished among the trees, then tightened his grip on his staff and followed. Unseen in the darkness beyond his sight, another pair of eyes watched him go, glowing briefly like pale embers before slipping back into the shadows of Mirkwood. The raven flew ahead like a fragment of the night itself, appearing and disappearing between the dark branches. Radagast followed as swiftly as he could through the rain-soaked forest, guided more by instinct than by sight. Water dripped from every leaf, and the ground had become a maze of mud, roots, and hidden hollows. Several times he lost sight of the bird entirely, only for its harsh call to sound again somewhere farther ahead. Whatever had frightened it was no ordinary beast. Of that he was now certain. The fear of animals differed from the fear of men. It was purer, sharper, and seldom mistaken. For nearly an hour he pressed onward beneath the storm. The forest around him changed as he traveled north. The trees grew older and larger, their branches twisted into strange shapes by age and weather. Moss coated the trunks in thick green layers, and hanging vines swayed gently despite the stillness of the air below the canopy. Few creatures moved here. No deer crossed his path. No fox darted through the undergrowth. The silence deepened until even the sound of his own footsteps seemed unwelcome. At last the raven settled upon a dead tree standing alone in a small clearing. Radagast emerged from the shadows and stopped at once. Before him lay the remains of a campfire, little more than wet ashes scattered among stones. Nearby stood two abandoned packs, partly torn open. One had been dragged several yards through the mud. The wizard crouched beside them and examined their contents. A flint, a cooking pot, and a few scraps of dried meat remained untouched. Whatever had happened here, robbery had not been the purpose. His eyes moved slowly across the clearing. Rain had washed away many signs, yet not all. Deep impressions marked the softened earth. Human footprints, 2 men at least. Then, crossing over them, came another trail. The tracks resembled those he had found earlier, but these were clearer. They belonged to a creature larger than any wolf he had ever encountered. The claws had sunk deep into the mud. Radagast measured one print with his hand and frowned. The thing had moved with confidence, almost casually, as though it feared nothing in the forest. A faint groan reached his ears. The sound came from beyond the clearing. Radagast rose immediately and followed it through a tangle of wet bushes. There, half hidden beneath a fallen pine, lay a man. He wore the rough clothing of the woodman, though his garments were torn and stained with blood. One arm bent at an unnatural angle. Mud covered his face, and his breathing came in shallow gasps. Yet he still lived. Radagast knelt beside him and gently lifted the fallen branches, pinning him down. The man's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, terror blazed across his face before recognition softened it slightly. "The brown wizard," he whispered through cracked lips. I prayed someone would come." Radagast gave him water from a small flask and supported his head. "Be still," he said quietly. "Your strength is needed for healing, not speaking." The injured man shook his head weakly. "No, you must hear. It took them." Lightning flashed somewhere beyond the trees, illuminating the forest in cold white light. Thunder followed several moments later. Radagast listened as the woodman struggled to gather his thoughts. "We were 3, the man said. "Hunters from the western settlements. We followed strange tracks northward, thought perhaps an orc had wandered from the mountains. He swallowed painfully. Then we found ruins. Old ruins beneath the hills. That was where it came. Even recalling the memory seemed to exhaust him. What came? Radagast asked. The man's gaze drifted into the darkness between the trees. A wolf, he whispered. At first I thought it a wolf. Then it stood beneath the moon. His voice trembled. No beast stands like that. No beast has eyes like burning coals. The woodman's breathing quickened. It killed Harl before I could draw my bow. Dren tried to run. The creature caught him and dragged him away alive. A shudder passed through him. Alive. Radagast felt a chill deeper than the rain could bring. The tales returned to him more clearly now. In elder days there had been werewolves, dreadful servants of darkness inhabited by evil spirits. Most had perished when the great fortresses of Morgoth fell. Others had been hunted down through the long ages that followed. Yet evil things were stubborn. Some survived when wisdom declared they should not. The world often hid its oldest wounds beneath fresh grass. The wounded hunter drifted in and out of consciousness, while Radagast tended his injuries. Broken bones he could not fully mend in a single night, but he eased the man's pain and bound the worst wounds. As he worked, the raven remained above them, silent and watchful. Several other birds gathered nearby despite the darkness. A tawny owl perched upon a branch only yards away. It stared northward without blinking. The wizard noticed this and followed its gaze. Far through the trees, almost hidden by rain and shadow, a faint red glow flickered. It appeared only briefly before vanishing again. Radagast narrowed his eyes. Fire had no place in that region of the forest. The woodman seldom ventured so deep, and no known settlements existed there. The glow suggested torches, or perhaps a furnace. Either possibility raised troubling questions. He glanced at the injured hunter. "Can you walk?" The man managed a weak laugh. "Not far." Radagast nodded. "Then we shall not try." Carefully he fashioned a shelter beneath the fallen pine. The forest itself provided what was needed. Branches, moss, and broad leaves soon formed a barrier against the worst of the weather. Animals emerged from hiding to assist in their own ways. Mice gathered dry grasses. A pair of badgers dug a shallow drainage trench around the shelter. The wounded man watched all this with wide eyes. Though tales of Radagast's friendship with beasts were known among the woodmen, witnessing it firsthand felt almost like seeing a forgotten piece of the elder days. Before leaving, Radagast placed a hand upon the hunter's shoulder. "Remain here until dawn," he said. "The birds will watch over you." The man caught his sleeve weakly. "Do not follow the ruins alone." Fear darkened his face once more. "There are more than wolves there. I heard voices beneath the earth." Radagast studied him for a moment. "What kind of voices?" The answer came after a long pause. "Men, orcs, and something else." The storm had begun to weaken when Radagast finally rose. Clouds drifted apart in places, revealing narrow gaps where moonlight filtered through. The red glow remained visible at intervals between the trees, distant but unmistakable. It pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of some hidden thing sleeping beneath the hills. The wizard drew his cloak tighter and started north once more. Every sign now pointed in the same direction. Behind him, the wounded hunter watched until the old wizard disappeared into the darkness. Ahead, unseen among the ancient trees, a massive shape moved silently through the forest. It paced between trunks thicker than towers, keeping perfect distance from the approaching wizard. Yellow eyes gleamed briefly beneath the moonlight before vanishing again. The hunt had already begun, though Radagast did not yet know whether he was the hunter or the prey. The forest climbed steadily upward as Radagast advanced into the northern reaches of Mirkwood. The land here was broken by ancient ridges and low hills covered in tangled roots. Moonlight filtered through torn clouds and painted pale streaks across the ground, though much of the woodland remained buried in darkness. The rain had passed, leaving behind a heavy silence and the smell of wet earth. Every sound carried farther than it should have. The creak of branches, the rustle of leaves, and the distant cry of an owl seemed strangely amplified, as if the forest itself were listening. The red glow appeared again among the hills ahead. It was clearer now, flickering between stone outcroppings half swallowed by roots and moss. Radagast slowed his pace. Experience had taught him that haste often served the enemy better than caution. He moved quietly through a stand of ancient beeches and reached a ridge overlooking a narrow valley. There he crouched among the shadows and studied what lay below. At first he saw only broken stone. Then the shape of the place revealed itself. Ruins stood beneath the trees, old beyond memory. Crumbling walls emerged from the earth like the bones of some dead giant. A collapsed tower leaned at an angle, wrapped in ivy and black vines. Sections of paved road still survived beneath layers of moss. Whatever settlement had once stood there had vanished long ago, perhaps before the coming of the Northmen, perhaps even before the forest had spread across the land. Yet something still lived among those ruins. Torches burned near the base of the shattered tower. Their light revealed movement. Radagast narrowed his eyes. Figures passed between the stones carrying spears. They were too small for men, and too bent for elves. Orcs, a handful at least, perhaps more hidden from view. He watched them patrol the ruins with nervous energy, constantly glancing into the surrounding darkness. The sight puzzled him. Orcs were cruel creatures, but rarely fearful. These appeared uneasy, as though they served a master they dreaded. A soft flutter of wings landed beside him. The raven had returned. It settled upon a stone and issued several low croaks. Radagast listened carefully. Birds observed much and understood more than many believed. The raven described strange arrivals over recent weeks. Orcs had come first, then wagons pulled by exhausted ponies. Finally, a great beast had entered the ruins beneath cover of darkness. Even the ravens had avoided it. The old wizard absorbed every detail in silence. None of it eased his concern. "The beast remains below?" he whispered. The raven bobbed its head. Radagast's gaze shifted toward the tower. Somewhere beneath those ruins lay tunnels or chambers hidden from sight. That explained the mysterious glow and perhaps the missing hunters. Yet it did not explain why such a place mattered. Orcs did not gather in forgotten ruins without purpose. Someone had organized them. Someone with authority and a plan. A sudden movement near the tower caught his attention. 2 orcs emerged, dragging a man between them. The prisoner stumbled repeatedly, his hands bound behind his back. Gray hair hung across his face, and his clothing was stained with dirt and old blood. Though exhausted, he remained upright through sheer determination. One of the orcs struck him with a spear shaft, provoking cruel laughter from the others nearby. Radagast felt anger stir within him. The captive was clearly no warrior. He appeared to be an elderly woodman, perhaps a hunter or trapper. The old man disappeared through a doorway at the tower's base. Radagast remained motionless for several minutes afterward. The sight changed everything. Missing animals could perhaps have been explained by a rogue predator. Missing hunters might have suggested wandering orcs. But a living prisoner guarded beneath ancient ruins pointed toward something larger. The question was no longer whether evil lurked here. The question was what it sought. Carefully, he withdrew from the ridge and circled the valley. The forest thickened on the eastern side, allowing him to approach unseen. As he moved, he noticed fresh wagon tracks leading toward the ruins. The wheels had carved deep grooves into the earth. Whatever had been transported there had considerable weight. Several times he paused to inspect broken branches and discarded debris. Fragments of crates lay scattered among the undergrowth. One bore a strange symbol painted in faded black pigment. Radagast frowned as he examined it. The mark resembled no heraldry of men or elves, yet it stirred a distant memory. Years earlier, he had glimpsed similar signs near Dol Guldur before the White Council drove the necromancer from that dark fortress. The symbol had belonged to servants of shadow, lesser followers who carried out hidden tasks beyond the sight of their masters. Most had vanished after the assault. Apparently, not all. The night deepened. Clouds drifted apart entirely, revealing a sky crowded with cold stars. From his concealed position among the trees, Radagast observed the ruins for hours. Orc patrols changed regularly. Torches were replaced. At intervals, supplies were carried underground through the tower entrance. No creature emerged from below except once. Near midnight, the guards suddenly grew silent and stepped aside. Even from a distance, Radagast sensed their fear. Something climbed out of the darkness beneath the tower. At first he saw only a shape larger than any wolf. Then moonlight touched its form. Thick black fur covered a body massive as a young bear. Its shoulders rose nearly as high as a horse's back. The head resembled a wolf's, yet there was an unnatural intelligence in its movements. Yellow eyes burned beneath a heavy brow. The creature paced slowly among the ruins, sniffing the air. Wherever it passed, the orcs lowered their gaze and retreated from its path. A werewolf. The word formed silently in Radagast's thoughts. For several moments he could do nothing but watch. Ancient stories became reality before his eyes. This was no mere beast, no oversized predator born in the wild. Malice radiated from it like heat from a forge. The creature paused suddenly and lifted its head. Radagast felt his stomach tighten. The werewolf was scenting the wind. Slowly, its gaze turned toward the forest. Toward him. Though hundreds of feet separated them, the wizard sensed the exact moment those burning eyes found his position. The creature froze. The night seemed to freeze with it. Neither moved. Neither looked away. Then, unexpectedly, the werewolf's lips pulled back in a terrible grin, exposing rows of long, white fangs. The beast knew he was there. Without warning, it leaped from the ruins. The distance it covered was astonishing. Stones shattered beneath its landing. Orcs scattered aside as it charged into the trees. Radagast rose instantly and retreated into the forest. Branches whipped past him. Roots twisted beneath his boots. Behind him came the thunder of pursuit. The werewolf crashed through undergrowth with frightening speed, yet its movements were not clumsy. It flowed through the darkness like living shadow. Radagast risked a glance over his shoulder. The yellow eyes were closing rapidly. Then the creature spoke. Its voice was deep and rough, twisted by a growl that seemed never entirely absent. "Run, little wizard," it called through the darkness. "Run while the night is young." For the first time in many long years, genuine dread touched Radagast's heart. A talking werewolf was far more dangerous than a mindless monster. Such creatures carried cunning equal to their strength. He pushed onward through the forest, seeking distance and advantage, but deep within he understood an uncomfortable truth. The enemy had already seen him. Whatever secrets lay beneath those ruins, their guardians now knew an intruder had arrived. And somewhere behind him, racing through the moonlit woods with terrible confidence, the werewolf was coming. Radagast ran through the dark forest with surprising speed for one so often mistaken for a harmless wanderer. Branches whipped against his cloak, and roots twisted beneath his feet like grasping fingers. Behind him, the werewolf crashed through the undergrowth, yet there was a dreadful rhythm to its pursuit. It was not charging blindly. It was hurting him. The realization settled heavily in the wizard's mind as he altered course twice and found the beast already anticipating the change. The ground sloped downward into a ravine choked with ancient pines. Radagast leaped across a narrow stream and landed hard upon wet stones. His staff struck the earth for balance. The cold water splashed around his boots and vanished into darkness. For a moment, the sounds behind him ceased. No snapping branches, no heavy footfalls, only the rush of the stream and the distant whisper of leaves high above. The silence was worse. Radagast slowed and listened. A shape dropped from a branch directly ahead. The werewolf landed lightly upon all fours, scarcely making a sound despite its enormous size. Moonlight spilled across its black fur. Water glistened upon its coat like silver threads. Its eyes shone with a yellow light that did not belong to the natural world. The creature's grin widened as it studied him. There was amusement in its gaze, and that unsettled Radagast more than rage would have. "You are slower than I expected," the werewolf said. Its voice rolled through the ravine like distant thunder. The tales spoke of one who wandered with birds and rabbits. They neglected to mention the running. Radagast tightened his grip on the staff. "The tales I heard of your kind ended badly for werewolves." The beast chuckled. The sound resembled rocks grinding together beneath a mountain. "Those were other ages, other masters. The world forgets many things." For several moments neither moved. The stream murmured between them. Clouds drifted across the moon, throwing shifting shadows over the ravine. Radagast measured the distance carefully. The creature was close enough to attack in a single bound. Yet it had not done so. It wanted something. Creatures of darkness rarely wasted words unless they served a purpose. "You guard the ruins," Radagast said quietly. The werewolf tilted its head. "I do. There is a prisoner beneath them." Again the beast smiled. "There are several." The answer sent a chill through him. The old woodman was not alone. How many captives had vanished into those hidden chambers? How many had never returned? Radagast forced himself to remain calm. Fear clouded judgment, and judgment would be needed before the night ended. "You serve Dol Guldur," he said. The werewolf's expression darkened slightly. "I serve no tower and no lord who hides behind walls." Its eyes narrowed. "I serve one purpose. That is enough." Before Radagast could press further, the creature moved. It happened so quickly that even his sharp senses barely followed it. One instant the werewolf stood across the stream. The next it lunged forward. Radagast swung his staff. Wood struck fur and bone with a heavy crack. The beast recoiled, but only for a heartbeat. It struck again. Claws tore through the air where the wizard's head had been moments earlier. Radagast stumbled backward onto the rocky bank. The werewolf followed relentlessly. Its size suggested brute strength, yet it fought with terrifying precision. Every strike forced him farther from the stream and deeper into the ravine. Stones shattered beneath its claws. Tree trunks splintered under accidental blows. The wizard avoided direct combat whenever possible. He knew strength alone would not prevail against such an enemy. A cluster of ravens erupted from the trees overhead. At the same moment, several owls descended from the darkness. Their wings beat furiously around the werewolf's face. The beast snarled and snapped at them. Radagast seized the opportunity. Raising his staff, he struck the earth with all his might. A blinding flash burst from the tip. For an instant, the ravine blazed with white light. The werewolf recoiled, roaring in pain. Smoke curled briefly from its eyes. Radagast did not wait. He turned and hurried up the slope while the creature recovered. The forest opened ahead into unfamiliar ground, scattered with enormous stones. Many protruded from the earth at strange angles, as though some ancient convulsion had thrust them upward long ago. Then he saw what the darkness had hidden. A ring of standing stones crowned the hill. Time had weathered them heavily. Moss covered their surfaces, and roots wound around their bases. Yet they remained upright. Ancient symbols, worn almost beyond recognition, had been carved into their faces. Radagast recognized them at once as relics of forgotten peoples who had lived in these lands before Mirkwood spread across the region. The place carried an old strength, not magical in the manner of elves or wizards, but rooted deeply in the memory of the earth. The werewolf emerged from the trees below. Its eyes still watered from the flash, though the injury was fading rapidly. "You cannot run forever," it growled. "No," Radagast replied, "but perhaps I need only delay you." The creature charged uphill. As it crossed the ring of stones, something unexpected happened. A low vibration shuddered through the ground. The werewolf faltered. Its paws slid briefly upon the earth. The beast snarled and tried to continue forward, but its movements became noticeably slower. Confusion flickered across its face. Radagast watched carefully. Whatever ancient purpose the stones once served, some fragment of their power remained. The werewolf felt it. More importantly, it disliked it. For the first time that night, uncertainty entered the creature's eyes. Radagast stepped between two of the standing stones and studied the carvings. Most had eroded into meaningless grooves. One symbol, however, remained visible. It resembled a chain. Another depicted a great beast bound beneath a hill. The wizard's thoughts raced. This place had not been built randomly. Long ago, someone had feared something enough to mark it in stone. The werewolf noticed where he was looking. Its expression changed immediately. The amusement vanished. The confidence vanished. In their place appeared something far more revealing. Alarm. "You know nothing," the beast snarled. "Perhaps," Radagast said, "but you seem worried that I might learn." The werewolf's lips peeled back from its fangs. Rage rolled from it like a physical force. Whatever secret lay beneath the ruins was connected to these ancient stones. Of that Radagast now felt certain. The creature had guarded its words carefully until this moment. Now it had betrayed itself. A horn suddenly sounded from the distant ruins. The call echoed across the forest. Another answered it. Then another. The werewolf turned sharply toward the sound. Torches moved among the trees below like scattered stars. Orcs were spreading through the woodland. Dozens of them. Radagast counted far more than he had seen earlier. The search had begun. The beast looked back at him one final time. "Run while you still can, wizard," it said. "The forest belongs to us tonight." Then it wheeled away and vanished into the darkness, racing toward the gathering forces. Radagast remained among the ancient stones as the echoes faded. The night had become far more dangerous. Yet he had gained something valuable. The werewolf feared a secret hidden beneath the ruins. A prisoner was being guarded. Orcs served an unseen master, and somewhere in the depths below the shattered tower, a purpose existed important enough to draw all these threads together. The wizard looked toward the distant torchlights moving through the trees. The hunt was no longer merely for him. Whatever evil was awakening beneath those hills, its servants were preparing for something. And if he wished to stop it, he would have to enter the ruins themselves before the secret buried there emerged into the world. The torches spread through the forest like embers carried by a rising wind. From his place among the ancient standing stones, Radagast watched their movements carefully. Orcs moved in organized groups rather than scattered patrols, sweeping through the woods with unusual discipline. Whoever commanded them possessed authority strong enough to overcome their natural tendency toward disorder. That fact troubled him almost as much as the werewolf itself. Orcs united behind a purpose often signaled the presence of a darker will. The wizard remained upon the hill until the nearest search parties passed below. He crouched behind one of the weathered stones and listened as harsh voices drifted upward through the trees. The orcs spoke of intruders, prisoners, and preparations that would soon be complete. Several times a name surfaced among their conversations, though none uttered it comfortably. They spoke it in lowered tones, as if fearful of being overheard. Radagast caught only fragments, yet one word repeated often enough to linger in his thoughts. The Keeper. No title could have been more unsettling. When the search parties finally moved on, Radagast descended the far side of the hill. He traveled slowly through the darkness, circling wide around the ruins. His goal had changed. Entering through the tower would be impossible now that the enemy was alert. Another path would have to be found. Ancient ruins often possessed forgotten entrances, collapsed tunnels, or hidden passages known only to those willing to search patiently. The forest itself might reveal what stone concealed. The eastern side of the valley proved less guarded. Here the land broke into steep ridges covered with thorn bushes and tangled roots. Several times Radagast discovered traces of old masonry beneath the soil. Moss-covered blocks protruded from the hillside. Fragments of shattered walls emerged between tree trunks. The ruins clearly extended farther underground than above. Entire sections of the ancient settlement had been swallowed by earth over countless years. Near midnight, he found what he sought. A narrow opening yawned beneath a cluster of roots at the base of a rocky slope. Most eyes would have overlooked it entirely. Ferns concealed the entrance, and fallen branches obscured the rest. Yet a faint current of air flowed outward, carrying the unmistakable scent of damp stone. Radagast knelt and examined the opening closely. Broken rocks suggested part of the passage had collapsed long ago. Even so, enough space remained for a determined traveler to squeeze through. He hesitated only briefly before entering. The tunnel descended sharply into darkness. The smell of wet earth thickened around him. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, echoing through unseen chambers ahead. Radagast moved with caution, one hand brushing the rough stone wall while the other carried his staff. The passage twisted frequently, sometimes narrowing until his shoulders nearly touched both sides. Several ancient support beams had rotted away completely. More than once he wondered whether the entire tunnel might collapse around him. After a long descent, the air changed. Smoke. Faint but unmistakable. Somewhere ahead, torches were burning. Radagast extinguished the small light he had summoned from the tip of his staff and continued in darkness. The tunnel eventually widened into a corridor fashioned by skilled hands rather than natural forces. Stone blocks lined the walls. Though cracked and worn by age, they remained largely intact. Ancient carvings decorated portions of the masonry. Most had been damaged beyond recognition, yet enough survived to reveal scenes of hunters, forests, and great beasts bound in chains. The same symbols appeared again. Chains. Bound creatures. Guardians. The wizard paused beside one particularly well-preserved carving. It depicted a monstrous wolf imprisoned beneath a hill, while armed figures stood watch above. Time had eroded many details, but the meaning remained clear enough. Radagast felt a growing certainty that these ruins had not been built merely as a settlement. They had served another purpose. They had been a prison. A distant cry interrupted his thoughts. Human. Weak. Yet unmistakably human. The sound echoed faintly through the corridors. Radagast followed it. The passage eventually opened into a larger chamber illuminated by torchlight. He approached carefully and peered around the corner. What he saw confirmed his fears. Iron-barred cells lined one side of the chamber. Several stood empty. Others contained prisoners. Men of the Woodmen sat huddled against the walls. Their faces were gaunt with exhaustion. Some bore visible injuries. Others simply stared into the darkness with hollow eyes. 2 orcs guarded the cells. The creatures lounged near a table cluttered with bones, scraps of food, and half-empty mugs. Neither appeared particularly attentive. One scratched lazily at its neck, while the other argued over stolen trinkets. Radagast observed them silently for several moments. Direct confrontation would risk alerting the entire complex. Fortunately, subtlety often succeeded where force failed. A faint scratching echoed behind the guards. Both orcs turned. The sound came again from the far side of the chamber. Annoyed, one of them rose and shuffled toward it. The second followed after muttering a curse. Neither noticed the cluster of rats emerging from cracks in the stone. The small creatures darted through the room exactly where Radagast had directed them. Within moments, the guards disappeared around a corner in pursuit of the disturbance. The wizard moved immediately. He crossed the chamber and approached the nearest occupied cell. The prisoners stared in disbelief as his familiar figure emerged from the shadows. One man nearly cried out before Radagast raised a finger for silence. Recognition spread through their faces. Hope followed close behind. "Easy," he whispered. "I cannot free everyone yet. Tell me what lies below." An older prisoner stepped forward. His beard was gray, his shoulders stooped, yet his eyes remained sharp despite captivity. "They seek Edric," he said quietly. "Who is Edric?" The old man glanced toward the deeper tunnels. "A trapper from the northern woods. He vanished weeks ago." His voice lowered further. "They question him every day. They believe he knows the secret paths beneath the hills." Radagast frowned. "A trapper knows such things?" The prisoner nodded. "He found something years ago, a hidden passage, ancient. He never spoke much about it afterward, said the place felt cursed." Before Radagast could ask more, hurried footsteps echoed through the corridor. The orcs were returning. The wizard retreated into the shadows just as the guards re-entered the chamber, grumbling angrily at the rats that had led them astray. Neither noticed the brief exchange. Radagast slipped away through a side passage and continued deeper underground. The corridors descended steadily. The air grew warmer. torches became more frequent. Soon he began hearing other sounds, hammering, chains rattling, the distant rumble of machinery. None belonged in forgotten ruins abandoned for centuries. Someone had invested considerable effort into excavating the lower chambers. The scale of the operation suggested months of labor at least. Then voices drifted from ahead. Radagast approached cautiously and concealed himself behind a cracked stone pillar. A large hall stretched beyond. Orcs moved through it, carrying tools and supplies. Several passages branched away into darkness. At the center stood a raised platform overlooking the activity below. Upon that platform stood a tall man, wrapped in black robes. His face remained hidden beneath a hood, yet authority radiated from him. Orcs obeyed his gestures instantly. Even from a distance, Radagast sensed the corruption surrounding him. Then another figure emerged from the shadows. The werewolf. The beast climbed the platform and addressed the hooded man in low tones. Though Radagast could not hear every word, several phrases reached him clearly through the hall. The wizard is here. He must not reach the lower vaults. The prisoner remains stubborn. The hooded figure listened without visible reaction. At last he spoke. His voice was calm, cold, and entirely human. Then break him before dawn. The werewolf bowed its massive head. For a moment neither moved. Then the hooded man added words that caused even the werewolf to stiffen. When the gate is opened, nothing else will matter. A silence followed. Radagast felt the blood drain from his face. A gate. Not treasure. Not conquest. A gate. Whatever lay beneath these ruins was more dangerous than he had imagined. And somewhere below, hidden in the deepest vaults, the enemy intended to open it before the coming of dawn. Radagast remained hidden behind the cracked pillar long after the conversation ended, allowing the sounds of the hall to wash over him while he considered everything he had learned. The hooded man descended from the platform and disappeared into one of the lower passages, followed by several armed orcs carrying lanterns and bundles of tools. The werewolf lingered behind for a short while, surveying the hall with watchful eyes before turning toward another corridor. Neither seemed aware that their words had been overheard. Yet the wizard knew his advantage was fragile, for every moment that passed brought the enemy closer to whatever purpose had drawn them beneath these forgotten hills. The mention of a gate troubled him more than he wished to admit. In Middle-earth, gates were rarely simple things when darkness gathered around them. Ancient powers often concealed dangerous places behind barriers of stone, iron, or sorcery. The carvings he had seen throughout the ruins returned vividly to his thoughts. Wolves bound beneath hills, guardians standing watch, chains etched into stone, the symbols repeated too often to be coincidence. Somewhere below lay a prison constructed long ago, and those who built it had feared what they confined there enough to leave warnings throughout the ages. Carefully withdrawing from the pillar, Radagast slipped into a narrow side passage that sloped deeper underground. The air grew steadily warmer as he descended. Moisture glistened upon the walls. Here and there, roots protruded through cracks in the stone, reaching downward from the forest above like skeletal fingers. The sounds of labor gradually faded behind him, replaced by a strange humming vibration that seemed to pulse through the rock itself. It was not loud, yet it carried a disturbing rhythm that reminded him of a heartbeat buried deep within the earth. After several minutes, he reached a junction guarded by no fewer than 4 orcs. Unlike those above, these warriors wore heavier armor and carried curved blades blackened with soot. Their expressions revealed none of the boredom common among their kind. They stood rigidly alert, glancing often toward a bronze-bound door set into the far wall. Torchlight flickered across its surface, illuminating intricate patterns worked into the metal. Radagast crouched behind a fallen section of masonry and studied the entrance carefully. Whatever lay beyond that door was important enough to warrant special protection. Fortune favored him unexpectedly when a distant horn echoed through the tunnels. The sound caused immediate confusion among the guards. Harsh voices rang out from passages above. Boots pounded against stone. 2 of the orcs hurried away to investigate, while the remaining pair argued loudly over whether they should follow. During the brief distraction, a cluster of bats emerged from a crack in the ceiling and swarmed through the corridor. The startled guards ducked and cursed. In that instant, Radagast moved with surprising speed, slipping past their position and into a shadowed alcove beside the bronze door before either noticed his presence. The door itself stood slightly ajar. Through the narrow gap escaped a faint glow, unlike ordinary torchlight, pale and silver rather than orange or red. Radagast pressed closer and listened. At first he heard only the distant drip of water. Then another sound reached him. A man's voice. It was weak from exhaustion, yet determination still lingered beneath the strain. The wizard recognized immediately that this must be Edric, the prisoner the woodman had spoken of. Whoever he was, he had resisted his captors for many weeks. "You may kill me if you wish," the voice was saying, "but I cannot tell you what I do not know." Another voice answered. It belonged to the hooded man, calm and controlled as before. "You know enough. You discovered the hidden passage. You walked the lower roads. You saw the seal with your own eyes." There was a pause, followed by the scrape of a chair across stone. "Memory is a stubborn thing, Edric. Given sufficient pain, it often becomes cooperative." Radagast's jaw tightened. He eased the door open slightly farther and peered inside. The chamber beyond had once been magnificent. Tall pillars supported a vaulted ceiling carved with images of forests, rivers, and distant mountains. Much of the artwork had suffered from age and neglect, yet traces of its former beauty remained. At the center stood a stone chair to which an elderly man had been bound with iron chains. His beard was gray and tangled. Bruises darkened his face. Even so, there was resilience in his posture. Though weary and wounded, he had not surrendered. Standing before him was the hooded figure. Several lanterns hung from iron hooks around the room, bathing the chamber in pale light. Upon a nearby table rested maps, scrolls, and fragments of carved stone. Radagast noticed at once that many bore the same symbols he had seen elsewhere in the ruins. The hooded man had clearly spent considerable effort studying the place. Whatever secret he sought, he believed Edric held the final piece needed to uncover it. The interrogation continued while Radagast listened from concealment. Gradually, fragments of the truth emerged. Years earlier, while trapping animals in the northern reaches of the forest, Edric had stumbled upon an ancient tunnel hidden beneath a landslide. Exploring it out of curiosity, he had discovered chambers buried far below the hills. There he found a great stone seal covered in warnings written in languages he could not read. Frightened by what he had seen, he sealed the passage as best he could and told no one. Unfortunately, secrecy had not protected him forever. The hooded man paced slowly around the prisoner while speaking. "The seal weakens with every passing year," he said. "The old enchantments are fading, and the prison beneath them strains against its bonds. We merely intend to hasten what time has already begun." Edric lifted his head despite his exhaustion. "You speak of it as though it were a servant waiting to obey you," he replied. Whatever lies below was imprisoned for a reason. The hooded figure laughed softly. And that reason has been forgotten. At those words, Radagast felt a cold unease settle over him. Forgotten reasons were among the most dangerous things in Middle-earth. Many evils survived because later generations remembered only fragments of old warnings while losing the knowledge that had given them meaning. The ruins themselves were evidence of that truth. Entire peoples had vanished. Their histories had crumbled into dust. Yet the prison remained, and now men ignorant of its purpose sought to tamper with it. The conversation ended abruptly when heavy footsteps echoed outside the chamber. The werewolf entered without ceremony, ducking slightly beneath the archway. Its yellow eyes swept across the room before settling upon the hooded man. "The search continues," it reported. "The wizard remains below. My trackers have found signs of him near the eastern passages." The hooded figure stiffened. For the first time, irritation entered his voice. "Then find him before he finds the vault." The werewolf's gaze drifted toward Edric. "Perhaps the prisoner should be moved," it suggested. "If the brown wizard reaches him first, our work becomes more difficult." The hooded man considered this briefly before nodding. "Take him to the lower level. We begin the opening before dawn." At those words, Edric's face paled visibly. Whatever lay beneath the ruins, he clearly understood its danger far better than his captors. Radagast withdrew silently from the doorway as preparations began inside. Chains rattled, orcs were summoned, orders echoed through the corridors. The enemy was accelerating its plans. Soon Edric would be moved deeper underground, likely into the very vault where the mysterious gate waited. If that happened, rescuing him would become vastly more difficult. Yet the wizard had gained something invaluable. He now knew where the prisoner was, who commanded the operation, and most importantly, that the opening would occur before dawn. Far below his feet, almost beyond hearing, the strange vibration pulsed again through the stone. This time it seemed stronger than before. Dust drifted from cracks in the ceiling. Several loose pebbles rolled across the floor. The sensation lasted only a few seconds before fading. Yet it left behind a profound sense of wrongness. Something beneath the ruins was stirring. Whether it sensed the efforts of those above or merely responded to the weakening prison, Radagast could not say. What he did know was that time was running dangerously short, and before the night ended, he would have to descend into the deepest chambers of the forgotten prison itself. The tremor faded, yet its memory lingered in every stone around him. Radagast remained motionless in the shadowed corridor, while the sounds of preparation spread through the underground complex. Orcs hurried from chamber to chamber carrying lanterns, ropes, tools, and weapons. Orders echoed through the passages with increasing urgency. Whatever ceremony or excavation the hooded man intended to complete before dawn had entered its final stage. The wizard could feel it in the changing rhythm of the place, as clearly as a hunter senses a storm before the first drop of rain falls. Moving carefully through side passages, he followed the activity rather than avoiding it. The enemy's haste now provided opportunities that caution alone could never create. Several guards abandoned their posts to answer summons from below. Work crews passed through corridors carrying crates and bundles of iron spikes. Even the patrol patterns had become irregular. The entire ruin seemed to be drawing inward toward a single destination somewhere beneath the deepest levels. As Radagast descended, the architecture changed noticeably. The upper chambers had belonged to a settlement or fortress. The lower halls felt entirely different. Here the stonework was older and more deliberate. Massive blocks fitted together with astonishing precision lined the walls. Ancient symbols appeared above nearly every doorway. Some depicted chains, others showed eyes, wolves, or stars. Most striking of all were the repeated images of watchmen standing guard over dark openings in the earth. Whoever built these halls had devoted extraordinary effort to preserving a warning. The passage eventually opened into a gallery supported by towering columns. Radagast paused behind one of them and surveyed the chamber ahead. Orcs crowded the room in large numbers. At least 50 were present, perhaps more. Some carried picks and hammers. Others guarded prisoners who had been brought down from the cells above. Among them, the wizard spotted Edric. The old trapper stumbled as he walked, yet stubborn endurance still carried him forward. 2 orcs supported him roughly, dragging him toward a staircase descending into darkness. The werewolf accompanied the procession. Its immense form moved through the crowd with effortless authority. Orcs stepped aside whenever it approached. Even those accustomed to its presence avoided looking directly at it. Radagast watched carefully as the beast paused near a stone basin carved with ancient runes. For a brief moment, the werewolf touched the edge of the basin with one clawed hand. The gesture seemed almost unconscious, yet the reaction fascinated him. The creature withdrew immediately, as though the contact had caused discomfort. A memory stirred within the wizard's thoughts. Long ago, during the Elder Days, many servants of darkness had been bound not only by physical walls, but by enchantments woven into the places that confined them. Such protections often lingered far beyond the fall of the kingdoms that created them. Perhaps that explained the werewolf's unease among the standing stones above. Perhaps fragments of the old defenses still endured, weakened but not extinguished. The possibility offered a small measure of hope. The procession continued downward. Radagast followed from a distance. The staircase descended through the heart of the hill in broad spirals. The air grew noticeably warmer with each level. Strange currents moved through the tunnels, carrying the scent of ancient dust and something older still. Not decay, not smoke, something buried, something sealed away for centuries beyond counting. Several times the wizard noticed cracks running through the masonry. Pale light leaked from them, faint and cold as moonlight reflected upon winter ice. Eventually, the stairs ended at a pair of colossal doors. Each stood 3 times the height of a man. Their surfaces were covered in carvings worn smooth by time. Yet enough remained visible to tell a story. Radagast studied them while concealed behind a broken section of wall. The left door depicted warriors driving back monstrous wolves beneath a sky filled with stars. The right showed the same creatures imprisoned beneath chains of light, while watchmen stood guard. There could no longer be any doubt. These halls had been built to contain something connected to the ancient werewolves of the Elder Days. The great doors stood open. Beyond them stretched a cavern vast enough to swallow an entire village. Radagast felt his breath catch as he looked upon it. The ceiling vanished into darkness high above. Stone bridges crossed deep chasms illuminated by the same pale glow leaking through cracks in the rock. Ancient statues lined the pathways. Most had suffered damage over the ages, yet enough survived to reveal stern guardians armed with spears and swords. At the cavern's center rose a circular platform surrounded by broken pillars. There, the enemy had gathered. Dozens of lanterns illuminated the platform. The hooded man stood upon it surrounded by orcs, tools, and excavation equipment. Nearby, Edric had been chained to a stone post. Maps and sketches lay spread across several tables. Radagast quickly understood their purpose. The enemy had spent months uncovering something hidden beneath the platform. Much of the ancient floor had already been cleared away. Freshly exposed stone formed a circle nearly 30 feet across. At its center lay a seal. Even from a distance, the wizard could see that it was ancient beyond reckoning. Interlocking rings of carved stone formed intricate patterns across its surface. Symbols covered every inch. Some were recognizable as warnings. Others belonged to languages lost long before the founding of Gondor. Thin cracks spread across portions of the seal like fractures in old ice. From those cracks emerged the pale glow filling the cavern. The humming vibration intensified. This time everyone felt it. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Lantern flames flickered wildly. Several orcs exchanged nervous glances. One dropped a tool and stepped back from the platform. The werewolf immediately fixed him with a glare so full of menace that the creature hurried back to work without protest. Yet fear was spreading. Even the least intelligent among them sensed that something beneath the seal was awake. The hooded man raised his voice above the growing murmur. "For centuries this place has remained forgotten," he declared. "Those who built it are dust. Their kingdoms are gone. Their vigilance has failed. Tonight the prison ends." The speech produced scattered cheers among the orcs, though many sounded uncertain. The werewolf remained silent. Its yellow eyes never left the seal. Radagast noticed the tension in its posture and understood that the beast itself did not entirely trust what was buried below. It desired the prison opened, yet feared the consequences. Such contradictions often revealed dangerous truths. Edric suddenly laughed. The sound echoed sharply across the cavern. Every head turned toward him. The old trapper lifted his bruised face and looked directly at the hooded man. "You fool," he said through cracked lips. "You think the seal was made to keep treasure hidden? You think some ancient servant waits below to reward your loyalty?" His voice grew stronger with each word, despite his condition. "The people who built this place feared what they imprisoned. They feared it enough to abandon their homes and leave these halls forever." The hooded figure approached him slowly. "And yet you never learned what it was." "No," Edric replied, "but I learned enough to bury the passage and walk away." For the first time that night, uncertainty flickered beneath the hooded man's composure. It lasted only an instant before disappearing again. Yet Radagast saw it. The enemy possessed knowledge, but not complete understanding. He was gambling with forces older than himself. Unfortunately, such men often proved the most dangerous because they mistook confidence for wisdom. The humming beneath the seal deepened into a low rumble that rolled through the cavern like distant thunder. Several new cracks appeared across the ancient stone. Pale light surged upward through them in brighter streams. Around the platform, the statues of forgotten guardians seemed to watch in silent judgment. Hidden among the shadows beyond the cavern, Radagast tightened his grip upon his staff and began considering how to stop what was coming. Whatever choice he made, it would have to be soon, for dawn was drawing nearer with every passing moment, and the prison beneath the hills was already beginning to open. Radagast remained concealed among the broken shadows beyond the cavern, while his mind worked swiftly through every possibility before him. The seal was failing, yet not entirely broken. The enemy controlled the platform, commanded dozens of armed orcs, and possessed the advantage of preparation. A direct assault would achieve little beyond drawing every weapon in the chamber toward him. Nevertheless, in the moments since his arrival, he had observed something important. The hooded man understood how to uncover the prison, but he did not truly understand the prison itself. That ignorance might yet prove fatal. The rumbling beneath the stone circle continued to strengthen. Fine cracks spread outward across the ancient seal, branching through the carved symbols like dark veins. Pale light pulsed from below with increasing intensity, washing the faces of the gathered orcs in a ghostly glow. Several shifted uneasily and muttered among themselves. Others stared fixedly at the floor, as though afraid to look directly at whatever stirred beneath. The werewolf alone remained near the edge of the platform, though even it seemed restless now, pacing slowly around the perimeter with ears flattened against its skull. The hooded man raised one hand, and the activity resumed. Workers returned to their tools. Iron wedges were driven into weakened sections of stone. Hammers struck the seal again and again. Each impact sent hollow echoes rolling through the cavern. Radagast watched the process carefully and began to understand what they were doing. They were not merely waiting for the prison to fail naturally. They were actively breaking it apart. Months of excavation had exposed the seal, and now brute force was being applied to finish the task before dawn. Nearby, Edric strained against his chains and shouted towards the workers. "Look at the statues," he cried. "Look around you, you fools! Why would anyone build all this merely to imprison a servant?" Several orcs glanced uneasily toward the towering guardians surrounding the platform. Their carved faces stared downward with expressions of stern vigilance. Even damaged by age, they possessed an authority that seemed to linger across centuries. Yet the hooded man ignored the warning entirely. "You mistake caution for wisdom," he replied. The ancient world was filled with fear. Every power was exaggerated, every danger wrapped in legend. What they buried here was no god and no demon. It was a weapon. He turned towards the seal as another crack spread across its surface. And weapons belong in the hands of those bold enough to claim them. Edric laughed bitterly, though the effort clearly cost him. That is exactly what every fool says before disaster arrives. The werewolf stopped pacing. Its head lifted suddenly. For several seconds it stood utterly still. Then a low growl emerged from deep within its chest. Radagast followed its gaze toward one side of the cavern, where a massive stone statue stood partly collapsed against the wall. At first he saw nothing unusual. Then movement caught his eye. Small shapes emerged from cracks in the rock. More followed. Then dozens more. Mice, rats, shrews. Tiny creatures poured silently into the cavern from hidden passages throughout the hill. The wizard understood at once. Without conscious thought, he had been calling to them for hours. Every frightened animal in the surrounding woods and tunnels had felt his need. Now they were arriving. The first orcs barely noticed the creatures scurrying beneath their feet. Then the flow increased. Hundreds of small bodies flooded across the cavern floor. Workers stumbled. Lanterns were knocked over. Crates tipped sideways. Confusion spread rapidly through the enemy ranks. Orcs cursed and kicked at the swarming animals, but for everyone they drove away, 3 more appeared from the shadows. The hooded man shouted orders. The werewolf roared. Neither reaction mattered. The disruption gave Radagast exactly the opportunity he required. Moving swiftly through the confusion, he slipped from concealment and crossed the outer edge of the cavern. Most eyes were focused upon the spreading chaos near the platform. The few guards who noticed him were distracted before they could react. Ravens descended from the darkness high above. Bats swept through the lantern light. The cavern became a storm of wings, claws, and frightened movement. Radagast reached Edric's position unnoticed. The old trapper stared in disbelief as the wizard emerged beside him. "I was beginning to wonder if you existed only in stories," he whispered. I have wondered the same thing about myself from time to time, Radagast replied while examining the chains. Despite the danger surrounding them, a faint smile touched his weathered face. Can you still walk? Edric nodded cautiously. If necessary. It will be necessary. The chains securing the prisoner had been fastened to iron rings embedded in ancient stone. Breaking them by strength alone would take too long. Instead, Radagast placed both hands upon the weathered rock and closed his eyes briefly. The stone had stood here for centuries. It remembered older shapes, older purposes. A faint crack spread through the base, then another. With a dull grinding sound, the ring loosened enough for Edric to pull free. The old trapper staggered but remained upright. You came alone? He asked. For the moment. The answer proved strangely prophetic. A deep howl rolled through the cavern. Every creature froze. The werewolf stood atop the platform, glaring directly at them. The chaos ceased to matter. The beast had found its true target. For several heartbeats, neither moved. Across the chamber, orcs gradually realized what was happening. One by one, they turned toward the escaped prisoner and the wizard standing beside him. The hooded man followed their gaze. His expression remained hidden beneath the cowl, yet Radagast sensed the cold fury radiating from him. Then the werewolf leaped. The distance was enormous. The creature crossed it in a single bound. Its claws struck the stone where Radagast had stood a fraction of a second earlier. The impact shattered part of the floor. Fragments flew in all directions. Edric barely avoided being crushed beneath the beast's weight. The old trapper stumbled backward while Radagast raised his staff defensively. Around them, the cavern erupted into violence. Orcs charged from every direction. Ravens descended upon their faces. Rats swarmed beneath their feet. Several lanterns overturned completely, plunging sections of the chamber into darkness. The statues seemed to loom larger amid the confusion. Above it all, the pale glow from the cracking seal continued to intensify. The werewolf advanced slowly. Its yellow eyes never left the wizard. You should have fled when I offered the chance, it growled. Radagast stood his ground despite the approaching danger. Behind the beast, new fractures spread across the ancient prison. The humming vibration had become a steady pulse that shook dust from the cavern ceiling. Whatever lay beneath the seal was closer than ever to freedom. I have met many creatures in Middle-earth, the wizard said quietly. Most of them feared what sleeps below. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the werewolf's face. Only for an instant. Yet Radagast saw it. And he understood that the creature's loyalty rested not upon confidence, but upon desperation. Something imprisoned beneath the ruins had promised freedom. Something old enough to frighten even a werewolf. And as the cavern trembled around them, and the ancient seal groaned beneath mounting pressure, the wizard realized that the true enemy had not yet emerged. It was still waiting below, patient and hungry, while servants and prisoners alike struggled above its prison walls. The cavern shook again, harder this time, and a deep crack split across the center of the ancient seal, with a sound like ice breaking upon a frozen lake. Pale light surged upward through the widening fracture and spread across the platform in ghostly waves. Orcs stumbled as the floor trembled beneath them. Several abandoned their weapons entirely and fled toward the outer passages. Panic moved through their ranks faster than any command could contain it. Whatever confidence they had possessed was being consumed by the growing realization that forces beyond their understanding had been awakened. The werewolf ignored the chaos around it. Its attention remained fixed upon Radagast with predatory intensity. The beast advanced one deliberate step at a time, while muscles rippled beneath its black fur. Behind it, the hooded man shouted orders and attempted to restore discipline, but his authority was weakening with every tremor. Fear had entered the cavern, and fear obeyed no master. Even so, the wizard could see that the man remained determined. Whatever waited beneath the seal, he still believed he could control it. "Edric," Radagast said quietly, without taking his eyes from the werewolf. "When you found this place years ago, what exactly did you see?" The old trapper stood a few paces behind him, breathing heavily from exhaustion. Dust coated his beard, and blood still marked his face, yet his voice remained steady. "I found a lower chamber beneath the seal. There were carvings everywhere. Most had crumbled beyond recognition." He swallowed and glanced toward the platform. One survived. It showed a creature neither wolf nor spirit, but something between the two. It fed upon fear. It fed upon hatred. It grew stronger wherever darkness ruled. The werewolf's ears flattened. Its lips curled back. "Enough," it growled. Edric continued anyway. "The ancient builders called it Garmorg. I remember the name because it frightened me." The effect upon the beast was immediate. Rage flared in its yellow eyes. For the first time, Radagast saw something else beneath that rage. Shame, fear, loyalty twisted into something uglier and more desperate. The realization came suddenly. The werewolf was not guarding a prisoner. It was guarding a master. Not a living master of flesh and blood, but the thing imprisoned beneath the seal. The beast charged. Stone shattered beneath its paws as it crossed the distance. Radagast met the attack with his staff. The impact echoed through the cavern. Pain shot through his arms as the werewolf's strength drove him backward several steps. Before the creature could strike again, a flock of ravens descended from the darkness overhead. Their wings battered against its face. Sharp beaks pecked at its eyes. The distraction lasted only moments, yet it was enough. Radagast struck the floor with the end of his staff, and a burst of white light exploded outward. The werewolf recoiled with a furious howl. All across the cavern, the pale glow beneath the seal answered. For an instant, the entire platform blazed with unnatural brilliance. Cracks spread through the ancient stone in every direction. A section of the seal collapsed inward. Cold air erupted from the opening. It carried a smell older than decay, older than death itself, a scent of forgotten darkness trapped underground for countless centuries. The hooded man stared into the widening breach with feverish triumph. "At last," he whispered. He stepped forward despite the warnings, despite the fear spreading through his followers, despite the violent trembling now shaking the cavern. Radagast saw the danger immediately. The seal had not fully broken yet. Portions still held. If the man continued interfering, the prison would collapse entirely. The wizard began moving toward the platform, but dozens of orcs blocked the way. Then something unexpected happened. A voice rose from the darkness below. It was neither loud nor commanding. In truth, it barely exceeded a whisper. Yet every living creature in the cavern heard it. The sound seemed to emerge directly inside their thoughts. The orcs froze where they stood. The ravens fell silent. Even the trembling earth appeared to pause for a single dreadful heartbeat. The voice spoke in no language Radagast recognized, yet its meaning arrived clearly enough. It offered promises, power, freedom, vengeance. Each listener heard something different. Each heard exactly what they most desired. The hooded man dropped to one knee. A look of wonder spread across his face. The werewolf lowered its head. Not in fear, in reverence. The truth became unmistakable. For years, perhaps decades, the imprisoned thing had been reaching outward through cracks in its prison. It had whispered into dreams. It had tempted the weak and the ambitious. The hooded man had never discovered the prison by chance. He had been guided to it. The werewolf had never served him. Both of them served the voice below. Another section of the seal collapsed. This time a shape moved beneath the opening. Radagast caught only a glimpse, a vast shadow, eyes glowing like distant embers, something far larger than a wolf. The sight lasted less than a second before darkness swallowed it once more. Yet that glimpse was enough. Whatever Garmorg truly was, it belonged to an age so ancient that even its memory had nearly vanished from Middle-earth. The hooded man stepped closer to the breach. "Master," he said softly. The whispering voice answered. Its response transformed him. Dark veins spread across his skin, his eyes widened. A smile of absolute devotion crossed his face. For one terrible moment he appeared triumphant. Then his expression changed. Confusion replaced joy. Fear followed. He staggered backward, clutching at his throat. The imprisoned creature had never intended to reward him. It had only needed a tool. The man collapsed, screaming. Shadow poured from the breach like smoke. It wrapped around him. His cries echoed through the cavern. Then they stopped. When the darkness withdrew, nothing remained except a withered husk crumpled upon the stone floor. The sight shattered whatever courage lingered among the orcs. Terror swept through them completely. Weapons clattered against the ground. Warriors fled in every direction. The werewolf stared at the remains of its ally. For the first time, uncertainty became horror. Its master was free enough to feed. And if it could consume a devoted servant so easily, what hope remained for anyone else? The cavern trembled violently. Huge cracks appeared along the walls. Ancient statues toppled from their pedestals and shattered upon the floor. Stone bridges collapsed into darkness below. Dust filled the air. Somewhere above, far beyond layers of rock and earth, the first faint hints of dawn were approaching. Yet deep beneath the hills of Mirkwood, the prison was failing faster than anyone had imagined. Radagast looked toward the widening breach and understood the choice before him. He could continue fighting the werewolf and likely perish, or he could attempt the impossible. Somewhere within the ancient seal, fragments of the old enchantments still endured. If they could be restored before the prison fully collapsed, there might yet be a chance to bind Garmorg once more. The chance was small, perhaps impossibly small. Yet it was the only one remaining. As the shadow beneath the seal began to rise, and the cavern groaned beneath the strain of ancient powers awakening, Radagast tightened his grip upon his staff and stepped toward the platform while destruction unfolded around him. The final struggle had begun, and before the sun rose over Mirkwood, either the prison would be restored or a forgotten terror would walk free beneath the trees once more. The cavern had become a place of ruin and terror. Great blocks of stone crashed from the ceiling at irregular intervals, smashing bridges and shattering ancient statues that had stood watch over the prison for ages beyond memory. Dust rolled through the air in thick clouds, illuminated by the pale light pouring from the broken seal. Orcs fled blindly through collapsing passages, abandoning weapons, tools, and companions alike. Their cries echoed through the vast chamber before being swallowed by the growing roar rising from the depths below. Amid the chaos, Radagast pressed forward toward the platform, while fragments of ancient masonry crashed around him. The widening breach now occupied nearly half the seal. Through it flowed darkness unlike any natural shadow. It moved with purpose. Tendrils of black vapor coiled upward and drifted across the platform like living things seeking prey. Wherever they touched the stone, frost formed instantly, despite the warmth rising from below. The sight stirred old memories buried deep within the wizard's mind. Long before the kingdoms of men had risen in the north, creatures of darkness had taken many forms. Some possessed flesh. Others existed partly within the unseen world. Garmorg appeared to belong to the latter kind, a predator of spirit as much as body. Edric reached the platform, moments behind him. The old trapper leaned heavily upon a broken spear he had seized during the confusion, yet determination still burned in his eyes. Together they crossed the cracked stone while tremors rippled beneath their feet. As they approached the center, Radagast knelt beside a section of the seal that remained intact. Ancient symbols still covered its surface. Many were damaged. Others survived. He ran his fingers across the carvings, searching for patterns, for meaning, for any clue left behind by those who had built the prison so long ago. Then understanding came. The symbols were not merely warnings. They were instructions. The builders had known that one day the seal might fail. They had prepared for that possibility. Certain markings repeated in deliberate sequences around the outer ring. Others connected to channels carved into the stone itself. Radagast followed the pattern with growing certainty. The prison had never depended solely upon stone. It had depended upon unity. Multiple points of power had once worked together to maintain the barrier. If enough of those points could be restored, even briefly, the prison might close again. A savage roar interrupted his thoughts. The werewolf had returned. The beast emerged from the swirling dust with bloodshot eyes and fur coated in debris. Yet something had changed within it. The confidence that once defined every movement was gone. In its place lived desperation. The creature glanced repeatedly toward the widening breach, as though fearing what might emerge next. Its master had promised freedom. Instead, it had witnessed the destruction of a devoted servant. Now the truth stood before it, impossible to ignore. "You see it now," Radagast said as he rose. "You were never its ally." The werewolf halted several yards away. Its breathing came heavily. For a long moment it said nothing. Then its gaze drifted toward the darkness below. "We served because we feared," it replied quietly. "Fear is a chain stronger than iron." The answer carried no defiance, only exhaustion. Another tremor shook the platform. The breach widened further. For a brief instant, a monstrous shape became visible below, vast and shifting, composed of darkness woven around ember-like eyes. The sight lasted only moments, yet it was enough to send a fresh wave of terror through every living creature in the cavern. Even the werewolf recoiled. "Garmorg does not seek freedom," Radagast said. "It seeks hunger. You know that now." The beast closed its eyes briefly. When it opened them again, something unexpected had entered them. Resolve. Without another word, the werewolf turned away from the wizard and faced the breach. The decision seemed to cost it dearly, as though years of obedience were being torn apart within a single moment. Yet, once made, it did not hesitate. The creature leaped across the platform and landed beside one of the damaged support rings surrounding the seal. There it lowered its massive shoulders against a fractured section of stone and pushed with all its strength. The ancient masonry groaned. Edric stared in disbelief. "It is helping us." "For now," Radagast replied. The wizard moved quickly. Guided by the surviving symbols, he began restoring the damaged pattern as best he could. Broken sections were repositioned. Cracked channels were aligned. The work would have been impossible alone, yet the prison itself seemed eager to aid those trying to save it. Fragments settled into place. Ancient grooves connected once more. Pale light shifted through the stone in new patterns. Across the platform, the werewolf fought desperately to hold collapsing sections together. Huge cracks spread beneath its paws. More than once it nearly vanished into the widening abyss. Yet each time it regained its footing and continued. Dark tendrils lashed upward from the breach, striking its body and tearing fur from flesh. The beast endured without retreating. Perhaps it sought redemption. Perhaps it simply understood that there would be no future if Gaurmorg escaped. The imprisoned horror sensed what was happening. The whispering voice returned. This time it no longer offered promises. It offered threats. The air filled with images not seen by the eye but felt within the mind. Forests burning beneath black skies, villages abandoned, creatures driven mad by terror. Ancient fears rose from forgotten corners of memory. Edric staggered beneath the assault. Radagast himself felt old doubts stirring within him, yet he remained focused upon the seal. Fear was Gaurmorg's weapon. Attention was its doorway. Far above, beyond layers of earth and stone, dawn was arriving. The first rays of sunlight touched the eastern horizon. The change was subtle at first. Then it spread. Through cracks in the cavern ceiling filtered faint strands of golden light. They descended through drifting dust and touched the platform. Where the sunlight met the darkness rising from the breach, the shadow recoiled violently. A howl unlike any sound heard before erupted from below. It was filled with rage, pain, and ancient hatred. Radagast seized the moment. Planting his staff at the center of the restored pattern, he called upon every fragment of strength the old prison still possessed. Light surged through the carved channels. The surviving symbols ignited one by one. Across the platform, ancient lines blazed with silver radiance. The broken rings surrounding the breach locked together. Stone shifted. Cracks closed. The prison awakened. Gaurmorg rose in fury. For a single terrible instant, its vast form emerged from the darkness below. Great jaws lined with spectral fangs opened toward the cavern. Ember eyes burned with murderous hunger. The sight would have haunted dreams for generations. Yet before the creature could fully escape, the seal began closing beneath it. Ancient power, renewed by sunlight and sacrifice, dragged the horror downward. The werewolf gave one final roar. With the last of its strength, it hurled itself directly into the narrowing gap. Its body vanished into the darkness below. A moment later, the seal slammed shut. The cavern fell silent. The pale glow disappeared. The whispering voice ceased. Only the distant sounds of falling dust and settling stone remained. For several minutes, neither Radagast nor Edric spoke. They stood upon the scarred platform, while dawn's light filtered through the fractured ceiling overhead. Around them lay the ruins of the enemy's ambition. The hooded man was dead. The orcs had fled. The prison endured. Though damaged, it remained closed. At last, Edric lowered himself onto a broken block of stone and released a long breath. "Will it hold?" he asked. Radagast looked down at the ancient seal. The cracks remained visible, yet the symbols glowed faintly beneath the stone. "Yes," he said, "not forever. Nothing in Middle-earth lasts forever, but it will hold for many years." Together they left the cavern and began the long journey upward. Along the way they freed the surviving prisoners and guided them toward the forest above. By the time they emerged from the hidden ruins, morning sunlight was pouring across the trees of Mirkwood. Birds sang once more among the branches. The oppressive silence that had haunted the woodland was gone. Weeks later, after the wounded had recovered and the prisoners returned home, Radagast stood outside his house at Roscobel, watching a flock of thrushes gather among the grass. The forest felt different now, lighter, healthier. Yet he knew many secrets still slept beneath the roots of Middle-earth, hidden in forgotten places where few would ever walk. Such dangers would never vanish entirely. They belonged to the long history of the world. A raven landed upon his fence post and fixed him with a bright black eye. For a moment the wizard remembered another raven, another night, and a trail that had led him into darkness beneath the hills. He smiled faintly and scattered fresh seeds among the waiting birds. The morning sun warmed the earth. The wind carried the scent of pine and growing things. And for a while, at least, peace had returned to the shadowed borders of Mirkwood.
Ну що, привітик. Хтось сказав трошечки себе давати трошечки тихіше, бо дехто не дослухає історію до кінця і вони вже засинають. Але я радий, що мої історії вас заспокоюють. Дивіться, до тих, хто дослухав, хочу трошечки звернутися, проаналізувати те, про що йшла мова, те, що я намагався до вас донести, бо хочу поговорити трошки про мужність, бо мужність – це коли людина не боїться. Хтось так думає. Але чим довше живеш, тим більше розумієш, що найсміливіші люди – це якісь звичайні, зазвичай вони бояться дуже добре, вони бачать небезпеку, розуміють наслідки, уявляють, що можуть втратити, і саме тому їхній вибір має вагу. Здається, між відвагою і безстрашністю лежить цілий світ. Безстрашність часто буває сліпою, вона дивиться вперед і не рахується з ціною. А відвага народжується саме тоді, коли людина значно знає цю ціну, але вони все одно робить крок не тому, що впевнена в перемозі, не тому, що вважає себе особливою, а просто тому, що хтось повинен це зробити. І, мабуть, саме таких людей ми пам'ятаємо найдовше. Не тих, хто нічого не боявся, а тих, хто не дозволив страху вирішувати за себе. Іноді найважливіші битви виграють не силою серця, а його здатністю тремтіти і все одно не відступати. Так що, ще хотів сказати, що якщо у вас є ідеї, про що можна написати, про що ви хотіли послухати, про яку саме частину Середзем'я, бо Середзем'я настільки велике, обширне, легендаріум дуже крутий, про які епохи я буду радий бачити ваші думки в коментарях. Я коменти читаю, можливо, не завжди відповідаю, але я читаю все, лайкаю все, тому, будь ласка, залишайте свої думки, залишайте мені і свої ідеї, і я постараюсь їх втілити в майбутньому.